Have you ever been crushed by a lie so heavy it stole your future? Picture a young black woman full of dreams, ripped from her family by a false accusation. Locked away for years, she refused to break. Instead, she rose to become a judge, wielding justice to free the innocent. This is Olivia Bennett's story, a tale of resilience that will grip your heart and inspire you to believe in second chances. Olivia Bennett was born on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. Her life wasn't one of privilege, no suburban lawns or private school educations. Her family lived in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a creaking old building right off Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. But what Olivia's household lacked in money and space, it more than made up for in love and determination. Her mother, Grace Bennett, toiled at 2 low-wage jobs to keep food on the table, while her grandmother, Lillian, wove lessons of resilience and pride into every lullaby she sang to Olivia at night. As Olivia grew older, it became clear she was special. She devoured every book in the school library, especially those about American history, law, and civil rights. She had a fascination with Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American Supreme Court justice. She watched documentaries about him on their small TV and read biographies that fueled her imagination. When Olivia spoke of becoming an attorney, her mother would gently place a hand on her shoulder and say, "Child, you can be anything you want to be as long as you never let anyone take your spirit away." In high school, Olivia joined the debate team. She quickly gained recognition for her calm demeanor and razor-sharp intellect. Her teachers whispered that Olivia had the makings of a future Supreme Court justice herself. She won scholarships, accolades, and the admiration of those who saw her potential. The dream felt real and close, but the world had its own plans, turns and twists Olivia could never have anticipated. During Olivia's senior year, her grandmother fell seriously ill. Lillian's medical bills piled up, and Grace Bennett, already juggling 2 jobs, sank deeper into debt. Olivia could have given up her dream to help shoulder these burdens, but her family insisted she press forward. They believed in her ambition, in her calling to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. "I'll take extra shifts," her mother would say, "but I refuse to see you abandon that brilliant mind of yours." Encouraged by their support, Olivia graduated with top honors and secured a partial scholarship to Howard University. Home to so many legendary black lawyers, activists, and leaders, the future looked promising. Yet on a warm August night, just a week before Olivia was set to leave for D.C., her life took a cruel turn. She was walking home from the grocery store, arms heavy with bags for that night's dinner, when sirens blared behind her. 2 police officers jumped out of a patrol car and approached her with guns drawn, their voices commanding her to put her hands in the air. Confused and terrified, Olivia complied, her groceries scattered across the sidewalk. She pleaded with them to tell her what was happening. Unbeknownst to Olivia, a robbery had taken place at a convenience store a few blocks away, and the suspect was said to be a black woman in her late teens, wearing jeans and a red t-shirt. Olivia wore a similar outfit. Despite her calm explanations and insistence that she had never even stepped foot in that store, the officers forced her to the ground and cuffed her. Witnesses in the neighborhood watched from their windows, some shouting protests, others scrambling to pull out cell phones and record the incident. Olivia's heart pounded as she glanced at the swirling lights, certain this had to be some terrible mistake that would be cleared up in a few minutes. Except it wasn't. At the station, detectives told Olivia that surveillance footage placed her at the scene of the crime, though the footage was grainy and the suspect's face barely visible. They claimed to have an eyewitness who saw a woman matching Olivia's description, fleeing with stolen cash. Olivia pleaded her innocence. She insisted she had been at the grocery store. The receipts and possibly store cameras could prove it. Yet she never got the chance to defend herself properly. The system, creaking under biases and a backlog of cases, took the easy route. Olivia was arrested, charged, and soon enough found herself behind bars, awaiting trial, because her family couldn't afford the steep bail. Within the span of a week, Olivia's life shifted from the joy of a scholarship-bound student to the horror of orange jumpsuits, iron bars, and the unmistakable clang of steel doors. She was no longer just Olivia Bennett, the bright young mind with a future. She was a prime suspect in a robbery case. That was the moment Olivia felt a cold certainty seep into her. Her entire life had been rewritten in a matter of hours by forces that seemed immovable. She vowed she would fight. She believed in justice. She believed that the truth always came to light in the end. After all, she had grown up idolizing figures like Thurgood Marshall. But in that first bleak moment inside a holding cell, Olivia's faith in fairness wavered. She could already sense the slow grinding wheels of a system that cared more for a quick resolution than the truth. Little did she know how far this injustice would spiral. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as Olivia's hearing date kept getting delayed. Each time her mother scraped together money for a lawyer, it evaporated in a flurry of medical bills or living expenses. The court-appointed public defender, while well-intentioned, was overwhelmed and had only a few minutes to spare for Olivia. Between juggling dozens of other cases, Olivia's attempts to provide an alibi like the grocery store security footage were met with bureaucratic hurdles and disinterest from an overtaxed system. After all, the store's cameras were malfunctioning that week, the clerk was out of town, and Olivia's pleas fell on deaf ears. In the span of these agonizing months, Olivia's faith wavered, but never fully broke. She wrote letters, countless letters, to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, to local civil rights groups, to the Innocence Project in New York. She detailed everything the night of her arrest, her frantic attempts to prove her whereabouts, and her unwavering innocence. Sometimes she'd receive polite but non-committal responses. "We appreciate your situation, but due to our current caseload," she understood, though it left her feeling powerless. Finally, the trial date arrived. Olivia, wearing the same ill-fitted suit her mother had purchased from a local thrift store, stood before the judge in a cold, fluorescent-lit courtroom. Her palms were damp with sweat, her heart thumping so loudly she feared the entire room could hear it. The prosecutor presented the surveillance footage, grainy black and white images that might have shown a young woman with a vaguely similar build. The eyewitness, a nervous store clerk with failing eyesight, pointed a shaking finger in Olivia's direction, claiming, "I'm pretty sure that's her." And if that were not enough, the police officers recounted the night in question. With unwavering confidence, Olivia had been found in the area wearing the same color t-shirt and had acted suspiciously. Olivia's public defender tried to raise doubts. The footage was not clear enough to definitively identify anyone. Olivia had receipts from the grocery store that placed her there around the time of the robbery, although the timestamps had somehow been smudged in the rush of the arrest. The defender attempted to argue that Olivia had no motive, no prior record, and that it was simply a case of mistaken identity. The jury, a mosaic of well-meaning citizens, some bored, some anxious, and some perhaps carrying unspoken biases, listened and deliberated for what felt like a heartbeat. When they returned with the verdict, Olivia stood up. Knees shaken, they pronounced. A hush fell across the courtroom. Olivia's mother let out a cry that echoed through the hall. Olivia's mind spun. This couldn't be real. She had believed, perhaps naively, that justice was as simple as truth, plus evidence. She never expected that a flawed identification and a legal system starved of time and resources could so easily destroy her life. The judge sentenced her to 7 years in prison, citing the severity of armed robbery and the alleged use of a firearm during the crime. Even though Olivia insisted no weapon had ever been found on her, as the gavel came down, Olivia felt as though her world had been splintered into pieces. She locked eyes with her mother, whose tear-streaked face was a portrait of heartbreak. Every dream of college, every debate, victory, every scholarship letter obliterated in a moment. Her first days at Lee Arundel State Prison were an out-of-body experience. The facility was overcrowded with women crammed into cells that smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant. Olivia learned quickly that innocence didn't matter. Here, survival did. She kept her head down, used her wit to avoid conflicts, and quietly poured her frustrations into journals, writing, and rewriting appeals in the prison library whenever she could access it. She read law, textbooks, devoured case studies, and started assisting other inmates with filling out forms or drafting letters to their own lawyers. The irony was not lost on her. She was a would-be law student now forced to play the part of an amateur jailhouse attorney for herself and others. Her resilience didn't go unnoticed. Some inmates, hardened by years behind bars, admired Olivia's optimism. Others, worn down by disappointment, warned her not to waste her energy on a system that had already chosen not to believe her. But Olivia refused to let despair consume her. Every day she woke up thinking of her grandmother, who had once told her, "When the world tries to bury you, sprout up stronger, child." So she studied and dreamed, harnessing the knowledge she hoped would one day free her. 2 years into her sentence, Olivia received a thin envelope from the Innocence Project. She had applied for their legal assistance many times before. This time, the letter stated they had begun a preliminary review of her case. It was no guarantee, but it sparked a small, vital flame of hope. She clung to that hope in the darkest nights, repeating to herself, "They will see the truth. They have to see it." Meanwhile, Olivia continued her daily routine in prison, coexisting with women from all walks of life, each with her own story of triumph or tragedy. She listened to them, learned from them, and sometimes offered comfort. What struck her most was how easy it was for someone, particularly a woman of color, to find themselves on the wrong side of the bars. A minor traffic stop, A questionable search or a single piece of false testimony could send a life spiraling into chaos. As her days turned into years, Olivia's determination only grew. She realized that prison was reshaping her not into a helpless victim, but into a ferocious advocate. She swore to herself that if she ever got out, she would use every breath to challenge this system. She would become the attorney, and perhaps one day, even the judge that her younger self had dreamt of being. This vow became her lifeline, a constant companion in the darkness of her cell. Though the sentence was for 7 years, Olivia clung to the dream that justice would come sooner. She knew her mother was working relentlessly to gather any new evidence. She knew the Innocence Project was out there, stepping through every piece of her case. She knew that somehow, some way her voice would not remain silenced, but the path would be long, and the trials ahead even more grueling than the steel bars that surrounded her. Year 3 brought a cruel blow. Olivia's beloved grandmother, Lillian, passed away. The prison chaplain delivered the news. Olivia felt her world collapse again, as though the only guiding star she had left had vanished. Lillian had taught her to stand tall and proud, no matter the adversities. Now Olivia had to live that lesson without the woman whose voice once sang her lullabies of strength. Prison protocol gave her a few minutes to make a phone call to her mother. Grace was inconsolable, and Olivia's guilt gnawed at her. She should have been there to support her family, to hold her grandmother's hand in those final moments. Instead, she was locked away for a crime she didn't commit. The night Olivia couldn't sleep, she lay on the hard bunk, tears tracing down her cheeks, replaying memories of Lillian, the scent of her homemade sweet potato pie, the way she'd hum gospel tunes on Sunday mornings. A molten anger began to bubble inside Olivia. Anger at the injustice, at the wasted time she would never get back, at the heartbreak inflicted on the people she loved. This anger became a catalyst. She channeled it into her case, intensifying her studies of constitutional law, criminal procedure, and any legal text she could find. She also worked tirelessly on her appeal with support from the Innocence Project, which had now assigned a junior attorney, Rachel Hayes, to investigate. Rachel was a soft-spoken yet tenacious advocate who believed Olivia's story and recognized glaring inconsistencies in the original trial. They corresponded through letters, phone calls, and occasional in-person visits, strategizing on how to move forward. The biggest breakthrough came when Rachel uncovered that the store clerk who had testified against Olivia had initially told the police she wasn't entirely sure about the identification. This doubt had been omitted in the final police report, replaced by a more definitive statement. Furthermore, Rachel found a potential alibi witness, a grocery store employee who recalled seeing Olivia that night, though she had left the city shortly after the incident and was never brought to testify. It was a small glimmer of hope, but enough to pursue a formal appeal. Then came a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate. Another inmate at Lee Arundel, a woman named Carla Reed, confided in Olivia. Carla claimed her cousin Jamal had bragged about committing that very same convenience store robbery years ago with his then-girlfriend, who matched Olivia's general description. Carla was reluctant to get involved, initially fearing retaliation from Jamal and his associates. but she had grown to respect Olivia's honesty and resolve, and she decided it was time to tell the truth. Olivia immediately notified Rachel, who with the Innocence Project team began seeking out Jamal's criminal records and any evidence that could corroborate Carla's statement. All the while, Olivia's reputation within the prison was changing. Once just another inmate proclaiming her innocence, she became a beacon of legal assistance for others. Women serving time for nonviolent offenses sought her counsel. Those who claimed wrongful convictions shared stories, documents, and pleas for help. Olivia did her best, though she was no licensed attorney. She wrote letters, drafted motions, and told them never to lose hope. Sometimes she succeeded in getting the attention of lawyers on the outside. Sometimes she didn't, but she never stopped trying. So years into her sentence, Olivia finally had her day in court again. This time she sat in the defendant's chair with a renewed sense of purpose. Rachel presented the new evidence, the inconsistencies in the eyewitness testimony, the grocery store alibi witness, and the statement from Carla Reed. The prosecution fought back, questioning Carla's credibility as a prison inmate and dismissing the new alibi as an afterthought, but Olivia sensed the tide might be turning. The judge, an older black man who seemed genuinely concerned by the revelations, called for a thorough review of all evidence, something Olivia's original trial judge had never done. After several weeks of legal wrangling, a bombshell dropped. The real perpetrators of the robbery were linked to another unsolved incident with a similar modus operandi. With mounting evidence pointing away from Olivia, the prosecution reluctantly conceded to a new trial. It was a nerve-wracking process. Olivia had to relive the trauma all over again. But this time, the jury saw a different story. The Innocence Project brought forth the grocery clerk, who'd left town, the conflicting statements from the store clerk's testimony, and records suggesting that Olivia was an easy scapegoat for a system hungry for quick closures. In a moment, Olivia would replay in her mind for years to come. The new jury returned a verdict of not guilty. Stunned silence filled the courtroom, followed by an outpouring of relief and tears. After nearly 6 years of incarceration, Olivia Bennett was exonerated. She stepped out of the courthouse into the blinding Atlanta sun, feeling the warmth on her face, as though it were her very first taste of freedom. Yet the jubilation was bittersweet. She had missed her grandmother's funeral. She had lost the carefree years of late adolescence and early adulthood. She had watched her mother age under stress and financial strain. She had been through a nightmare that no innocent person should ever endure. Still, Olivia clutched her mother in a tearful embrace, determined that she would not waste another moment. She had a life to rebuild, a debt to repay to those who had believed in her, and a larger mission to fight for others who had been unjustly labeled criminals. She understood too well the toll of injustice and the fragility of freedom, and she vowed to transform her sorrow into something that might protect others from ever enduring what she had. Returning home after 6 years in prison was a surreal experience. The world had moved on in Olivia's absence. Her old neighborhood looked both familiar and alien. New buildings had sprung up. Old ones had been demolished, and friends had moved away or drifted apart. Yet one constant remained her mother's unwavering love. Grace Bennett had aged visibly with streaks of gray in her hair and worry lines etched into her face. But when Olivia returned, the mother-daughter bond felt stronger than ever. Olivia had received a modest sum in compensation for her wrongful conviction, thanks to Georgia's indemnification laws. It wasn't enough to erase the pain or make up for lost time, but it was a start. She used a portion of the money to cover her mother's lingering medical bills and to make sure they had a comfortable place to live. The rest she earmarked for a future she had never stopped dreaming about: law school. Some advised Olivia to rest, to ease back into normal life. But Olivia refused to delay her ambitions any longer. She applied to Howard University School of Law, the very place she had once dreamed of attending, before her life took a catastrophic detour. Her admission essay told her story, a cautionary tale, about how easily an innocent person could be lost in the judicial system. Her sincerity and passion, coupled with her past academic achievements, compelled the admissions committee. She was accepted with a scholarship that would at least cover her tuition. She breathed a sigh of relief when she received that acceptance letter. Fate seemed to be granting her a second chance. Law school was a revelation. Olivia was surrounded by brilliant minds, professors, who had argued landmark cases before the Supreme Court, classmates who had interned for judges and activists passionate about criminal justice reform. The very environment buzzed with possibility. At times, Olivia felt older than her peers. They were fresh from undergraduate programs, brimming with theoretical knowledge, whereas Olivia had first-hand experience of the system's darkest flaws. When her professors discussed wrongful convictions, mandatory minimums, and prosecutorial misconduct, Olivia could offer more than academic insight. She could offer real scars. Some days were overwhelmingly painful. Flashbacks of prison life would resurface whenever she read about court cases that paralleled her own. But she kept going, fueled by her grandmother's memory and her mother's quiet pride. She graduated near the top of her class, forging friendships with peers and faculty who saw in her not just a bright mind, but a living testament to the urgency of legal reform. After passing the bar exam, Olivia joined a prestigious civil rights law firm in Atlanta. She quickly made a name for herself, tackling pro bono cases for those who were like she once had been wrongfully accused, judges' attorneys, and the public began to notice her fiery dedication. When she spoke, people saw not just a lawyer advocating for a client, but a survivor testifying to the system's potential for both harm and healing. In time, Olivia's reputation soared. She was interviewed on local news stations about criminal justice reform. She spoke on panels alongside noted activists like Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. She gave lectures at law schools, sharing her personal story as both a caution and a rallying cry for future lawyers. Still, Olivia felt the pull of something greater. She remembered her teenage dream of sitting on the bench, wielding the gavel with fairness and empathy. A seat opened up in the Fulton County Judiciary, and she decided to run for it. Some advised her to wait. She was still young, relatively new to practicing law. But Olivia's supporters rallied around her. They saw in her a figure who could genuinely transform the local justice system from the inside. Her campaign focused on accountability, transparency, and the urgent need for judicial integrity. She recalled her own trial, how quickly the judge had accepted flimsy evidence. She promised that as a judge, she would hear every defendant, every victim, every family. With respect and open-mindedness, her opponents tried to use her incarceration against her, whispering about whether someone who spent time behind bars, regardless of her eventual exoneration, was fit to wear the robe. But Olivia refused to shy away from her past. She wore it like a badge of resilience, reminding voters that if the system could wrong her, it could wrong anyone, and that she was living proof of how precarious justice could be, especially for marginalized communities. To many, Olivia was a hero. To others, a risky anomaly. Yet her eloquence and authenticity shone through in debates, interviews, and community gatherings. She won the election by a striking margin. On a crisp morning in January, standing in front of the Fulton County Courthouse, she took her oath of office. Her mother watched from the front row, tears streaming. The images of Olivia, raising her right hand, pledging to defend the Constitution that once failed her, became symbolic of hope for so many who felt the law had never quite protected them. And so, Olivia Bennett, once an inmate with no future, became Judge Bennett, a woman determined to shift the balance of power and protect the innocent. It was a dream fulfilled, but also the beginning of a heavier responsibility. She knew that each ruling she made, each sentence she handed down, or appeal she granted, could mean the difference between freedom and captivity for another human being. And she vowed to never forget the lonely nights she spent in a cell, nights that forged in her a profound empathy for every individual who walked into her courtroom. Dressed in her black judicial robe, Olivia Bennett presided over a bustling courtroom. Cases ranged from minor misdemeanors to complex felonies, and each required her steady, impartial scrutiny. The first few weeks were surreal, a trial by fire in which Olivia discovered just how complex and politically fraught every decision could be. Prosecutors vied for convictions to maintain high success rates. Public defenders were often overworked and under-resourced, and defendants, many from impoverished backgrounds, were terrified and confused. She saw reflections of her younger self in their anxious eyes. Being a judge also meant balancing empathy with the law. Olivia had to uphold statutes, follow legal precedents, and maintain the decorum of the court. At times that meant handing down sentences she found harsh but were mandated by law. Yet she leveraged her role to encourage alternative programs for low-level offenders. Drug treatment, courts, community service, restorative justice. She advocated for thorough pre-trial investigations, pushing back when prosecutors seemed too eager to rely on shaky eyewitness testimony. Her uncompromising stance on evidence required police departments to be more diligent. Soon she earned a reputation as a judge who neither prosecutors nor defense attorneys could take lightly. Off the bench, Olivia became a mentor and a community figure. She spoke at local schools and youth centers, teaching kids about their rights and the importance of civic engagement. She funded scholarship programs for at-risk youth aspiring to study law. She partnered with nonprofits to develop job training programs for ex-offenders. Each initiative was a layer in her broader mission to repair a system riddled with cracks. Despite these successes, Olivia's past and her ascendancy to the bench drew attention, some positive, some hostile. Conservative voices scoffed at the ex-convict, wearing judicial robes, questioning her impartiality. Internet trolls posted hateful comments about her race and gender, dredging up her false conviction as if it still tainted her integrity. At times, these attacks stung, but Olivia remembered her mother's words. "Don't let anyone take your spirit away." She refused to be intimidated. As far as she was concerned, every hateful remark was proof that her presence on the bench was shaking up entrenched biases. Then came a case that tested Olivia's resolve. A young man named Marcus Turner, 22 years old, was accused of shooting a convenience store clerk during an attempted robbery. The prosecution's evidence hinged on a single eyewitness, an older woman who swore she saw Marcus fleeing the scene with a gun. Marcus maintained his innocence. He insisted that he was at his aunt's house, and the woman had mistaken him for someone else. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. This was uncomfortably similar to her own ordeal. She knew she had to tread carefully, ensuring fairness above all else. The trial was tense. The eyewitness wavered under cross-examination, admitting she had seen the shooter from a distance. Forensic evidence linking Marcus to the crime was weak. No gun residue on his hands, no matching shell casings. But the prosecution argued that the aunt's testimony was family loyalty, not truth, and that Marcus had a known association with local gang members. As Olivia watched the proceedings, she sensed that the case was not airtight. She fought the urge to intervene beyond her judicial role. Instead, she ensured that defense counsel had every opportunity to question the state's evidence. She reminded the jury of the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for days. In the end, they returned with a verdict of not guilty. Olivia felt a rush of relief. Relief not that she had pushed for a particular outcome, but that justice had prevailed through a fair process. It was a critical moment in her career, a demonstration of how her courtroom could be a place where evidence, not prejudice, determined fate. That same day, a different defendant, a woman who had been caught shoplifting baby formula, broke down in tears when Olivia gave her probation and mandated job training instead of jail time. The woman Olivia learned was a single mother, 29 years old, desperately trying to feed her infant. In Olivia's judgment, sending her to jail would do nothing but break her further. She believed in second chances in redemption, and she had the authority to grant them when the law allowed. Yet not every story in Olivia's courtroom ended so neatly. She presided over domestic violence cases that left her sick to her stomach. Hearing testimonies of brutality and despair, she saw young people barely out of their teens entangled in violent crime. In some instances, the evidence was indisputable, and Olivia had no choice but to impose sentences that would rob them of years, even decades of their lives. These moments haunted her. She reflected on how the system often addressed the problem only after it was too late, instead of investing in prevention and community support. Still, she did her part within the boundaries of the law to inject compassion where possible. Late at night, when she finally hung up her robe and returned to her modest home, Olivia sometimes felt the weight of the entire justice system on her shoulders. She remembered the lonely nights in prison, the fury she felt at the injustice done to her. Now that she was in a position of authority, she refused to let that anger dissipate without purpose. It fueled her determination to maintain the highest standards of fairness, to question evidence, to ensure due process for every person who stood before her bench. And with each case, she judged Olivia was reminded of the pledge she'd made long ago in her prison cell. She would fight for the innocent and the vulnerable, no matter the cost. The memory of her grandmother's unwavering faith in her provided comfort. She was no longer a victim of circumstance. She was an agent of justice, wielding her power to tip the scales in favor of truth. Olivia's influence grew beyond the courthouse community leaders, and activists saw in her a beacon of integrity, a living example that change was possible from within. Her partnership with organizations like the Innocence Project and Equal Justice Initiative grew stronger. She hosted workshops for local police precincts, emphasizing the importance of proper investigative methods and the grave consequences of wrongful convictions. Some officers resisted, feeling she was undermining their work. Others welcomed the education, recognizing that improved procedures would build public trust. Olivia insisted that the job of the justice system was not just to convict, but to get it right. Amid these efforts, Olivia received an unexpected letter. It was from none other than Detective James Carter. 57 years old, the lead officer who had arrested her all those years ago. The letter was short, almost terse. Judge Bennett, I know. I did you wrong. I'm retiring soon. And before I go, I want to make amends. I followed flawed procedures and let my biases cloud my judgment. I'd like to talk, if you'll let me. The sight of Detective Carter's signature made Olivia's stomach twist. She remembered the rage, fear, and humiliation she felt the night he arrested her. She considered ignoring the letter, but something nudged her to respond. Perhaps hearing him out could offer closure or even yield insights into how to prevent future injustices. They met in a discreet diner on the outskirts of Atlanta. Detective Carter looked older, grayer. His eyes weighed down by a kind of guilt Olivia had seen many times in her courtroom. He stammered his way through an apology, explaining how the department had been under immense pressure to solve the rash of robberies in the area Olivia had simply been the easiest fit for their suspect profile. She asked him point blank if he had ever truly believed she was guilty. He hesitated, admitted that he'd had doubts, but once the case was in motion, he felt compelled to push it forward to avoid looking incompetent. Olivia felt a surge of anger, but also pity. She asked him if he understood the gravity of what he'd done, not just to her, but to her family, and how many other families might have been torn apart by similar shortcuts. Tears rimmed Carter's eyes. He said he was trying to speak out against racial profiling and lax investigative standards before retirement, to ensure future detectives wouldn't repeat his mistakes. Olivia offered him no absolution, but she did say, "If you're serious, use your voice. Help us change this system." It was a tense, emotional meeting, yet Olivia left it feeling a strange sense of closure. She had faced one of the men responsible for her downfall, and in confronting him, she felt a burden lift from her shoulders. As Olivia's profile rose, some political figures began to see her as a threat. Her insistence on thorough investigations and her vocal stance against prosecutorial misconduct made her unpopular in certain circles. Rumors spread that Olivia was too soft on crime, that she was letting criminals walk free. One of her primary adversaries was District Attorney Robert Klein. 52 years old, a man known for his tough-on-crime approach, he viewed Olivia's reforms as a direct challenge to his authority. Tensions between the bench and the DA's office escalated when Olivia dismissed several cases due to improperly obtained evidence and questionable witness reliability. Matters reached a boiling point when Olivia discovered that one of Klein's assistant district attorneys, Linda Brooks, 39 years old, had withheld exculpatory evidence in a high-profile drug case Olivia publicly called Brooks out from the bench, citing the Brady rule that mandates disclosure of evidence favorable to the defense. Klein lashed back, accusing Olivia of judicial overreach and stepping outside her role. The local media had a field day. Some praised Olivia's courage. Others portrayed her as an activist judge, meddling in prosecutorial matters. The conflict culminated in a hearing before the state's Judicial Conduct Board, prompted by a formal complaint from DA Klein's office, alleging Olivia had shown bias. Olivia appeared at the hearing, calm but resolute. She explained that her actions were rooted in legal precedent and ethical obligations to ensure fairness. Numerous legal experts and community members testified in her defense, highlighting her impeccable record and respect for judicial standards. Ultimately, the board dismissed the complaint, but not without acknowledging the deep fissure in the city's justice system. Olivia emerged from the hearing more determined than ever. She recognized that her fight wasn't just against a few unethical players, but against an entire entrenched culture that valued convictions over truth. It became her mission to build alliances with those in law enforcement prosecution and defense who sought genuine justice rather than trophies. However, the personal toll was heavy. Olivia's mother fretted over her safety, worried that powerful adversaries might seek retaliation. She received hate mail, some of it disturbingly personal. And in her quiet moments at home, Olivia felt the lingering weight of that fear she once knew in prison. Still, she refused to back down. She had been wrongly convicted and learned the hard way what injustice feels like. She wouldn't let fear silence her. Now karma in its own way had begun to unfold. Detective Carter sought redemption for his role in her wrongful conviction. District Attorney Klein's office came under scrutiny when the media discovered other cases with potential withheld evidence. One assistant district attorney resigned rather than face a disciplinary hearing. Another was placed on administrative leave. The public outcry forced a re-examination of the win at all costs mentality that had permeated parts of the criminal justice system in Atlanta. Amid all these storms, Olivia stayed true to her purpose. She was no longer the helpless teen pinned to the ground by the weight of false accusations. She was a judge, a guardian of the law determined to use her past suffering to guide others toward a fairer tomorrow. And with every case she oversaw, every decision she handed down, Olivia Bennett inched closer to realizing her ultimate goal, not just to be a judge who was once wrongfully jailed, but to be the catalyst of transformative justice in a flawed system. A few years into her tenure, Judge Olivia Bennett had overseen hundreds of cases. Yet one particular hearing would become the highlight of her career. Through her work with the Innocence Project, she learned of a middle-aged black man named Clarence Wilson, 47 years old, who had spent nearly 15 years in prison for a homicide. He swore he did not commit. His conviction had been secured primarily on the testimony of a jailhouse informant, an individual who later recanted. The Innocence Project had uncovered DNA evidence pointing to a different suspect. Now they needed a judge with the courage to reopen the case. Olivia accepted the motion for a new trial without hesitation. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, she meticulously reviewed evidence transcripts and post-conviction briefs. The case was eerily reminiscent of her own shoddy evidence, questionable testimony, and a prosecution more invested in winning than in truth. When the day of the hearing arrived, Olivia sat on the bench, her expression composed but resolute. The new evidence was damning. The DNA found at the crime scene did not match Clarence Wilson or any of his known associates. It matched another individual who had since passed away, but was closely tied to a local gang at the time of the murder. The informant admitted he had lied to secure a plea deal for his own unrelated charges. The defense also presented witness statements that had never been brought to trial, each offering alibis for Clarence's whereabouts. After days of testimony, it was clear that the original case against Clarence Wilson had been built on a crumbling foundation. Olivia weighed her gavel in her hand, recalling the moment she had once stood, accused. She knew how every tick of the clock felt like a noose tightening around your future. With a firm rap on the bench, she declared the conviction overturned, ordering Clarence Wilson to be released immediately. The courtroom erupted in gasps and cries, some joyful, some stunned. Clarence fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, thanking God in the court for giving him his life back. That night, Olivia found herself weeping in the privacy of her chambers. They were tears of relief, of triumph, of remembrance. She wept for the years she had lost, for the years Clarence had lost, and for the many souls still trapped by injustice. But she also wept because she saw the circle complete itself. She had turned her personal tragedy into the power to help someone else avoid the fate she once endured. News of Clarence Wilson's exoneration spread quickly, elevating Olivia's standing as a groundbreaking judge who championed truth over expediency. Interviews and op-eds highlighted her own wrongful conviction as the catalyst for her unwavering commitment to justice. In the following months, Olivia received invitations to speak at national conferences and law schools, urging systemic reforms, improved forensic procedures, stricter guidelines for eyewitness identifications, better oversight of prosecutorial practices, and expanded support for re-entry programs. But Olivia's story also carried a cautionary note about karma and accountability. The senior prosecutor, who had originally tried Clarence Wilson, faced disciplinary action, his career in shambles. The law enforcement officers involved in that flawed investigation were pressured into retirement or forced to undergo rigorous retraining. Some critics complained that Olivia's role in these purges overstepped her authority. Olivia disagreed. She believed accountability was a cornerstone of justice. Without it, mistakes would be repeated and more innocent lives destroyed. With each public victory, Olivia remained mindful that triumphs like Clarence Wilson's exoneration were still the exception, not the rule. The criminal justice system was large, slow to change, and constantly at risk of reverting to old habits. Yet she saw glimmers of hope in new reforms taking root across the country, states reevaluating mandatory minimums, courts scrutinizing eyewitness testimonies with renewed skepticism, and district attorneys embracing conviction integrity units. She felt proud to be part of the wave driving these changes. Personally, Olivia found a kind of healing. She revisited her grandmother's grave for the first time since her exoneration, placing a bouquet of white lilies and quietly telling Lillian that she had fulfilled her promise. "I made it, Grandma," she whispered, tears wetting her cheeks. "And I'm not done yet. I have so much more to do." Still, life had one more twist to deliver. On an otherwise routine day, Olivia found a letter on her desk from the same detective who had uncovered the critical evidence in Clarence Wilson's case. Detective Rob Thompson, 36 years old, wrote that he had found other suspicious convictions from the same era, cases tried by the same prosecutors who had pursued Clarence's conviction. He wanted Olivia's help to persuade the judiciary to review those cases. Even though the old convictions were technically outside her jurisdiction, Olivia faced a dilemma. She couldn't unilaterally reopen cases in courts where she had no authority. Yet, if there was even a small chance that innocent people remained behind bars due to faulty investigations, she felt compelled to act. She reached out to local judges in those jurisdictions, presenting the new information. She worked with attorneys from nonprofits and law schools to put together a task force. While she could not personally preside over all those cases, Olivia used her influence to advocate for a thorough review, leveraging media attention and public support to pressure officials into doing the right thing. In the end, Olivia Bennett had become more than a judge. She was a force for transformation. She had built alliances with reform-minded prosecutors, conscientious detectives, and passionate activists, each playing a vital role in dismantling an edifice of injustice, brick by brick. It was exhausting at times, heartbreaking work, but Olivia wouldn't trade it for anything. She knew that every innocent person freed, every biased practice exposed, was a victory for a nation still wrestling with the scars of racism and inequality. Her journey stood as a testament to karma's intricate design. The detective who wronged her sought redemption. The prosecutor who built his career on shaky cases fell from grace. And Olivia herself, once branded a criminal, now wielded the power of the bench to set others free. In that sense, the wheel of fortune had turned full circle. Olivia Bennett had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her future. And in doing so, she gave countless others a chance to do the same. Olivia Bennett's journey from wrongfully jailed inmate to a crusading judge reminds us all, no matter how hopeless our situation may seem, resilience can shatter any wall of injustice. She saw the system at its worst, survived its harshest blows, and returned to reshape it with compassion and courage. Hers is not just a story of personal redemption. It's an urgent call for accountability and empathy in every courtroom, every police station, and every heart that believes in true justice. If Olivia Bennett's incredible journey moved, you please help us share her story with the world. Click the like button to show your support for stories of resilience and justice. Share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who believes in the power of second chances. Drop a comment below. Tell us what part of Olivia's story inspired you most, or share your own experiences with overcoming adversity. And if you're as passionate about uplifting narratives as we are, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated on every new story we bring you. Your engagement helps us amplify voices like Olivia's, shining a light on the fight for fairness and equality. Thank you for joining us in this mission together. We can inspire change one story at a time.